Part 1. It began on a quiet morning when a 16-year-old girl, who had always loved the sound of a piano, stood in the hallway of her school's music room. She liked playing the piano more than anything else, but she often kept her talent hidden. She worried that others might laugh or think she was trying too hard. Whenever she played at home, she felt free. But playing in front of others felt different. It made her nervous. That week, the school was preparing for its annual music showcase. Students from different classes were signing up to perform. Some were excited, some were scared, and a few were just doing it because their friends told them to. She had thought about performing too, but every time the idea came to her mind, she pushed it away. She wondered, what if I make mistakes? What if people think I'm not good enough? One afternoon, she finally gathered the courage to talk to her music teacher. The teacher was kind, but often underestimated her because she rarely spoke up. The teacher looked at her with a gentle smile and asked, "So, are you planning to perform this year?" She quietly nodded, feeling her heart race. The teacher encouraged her but quickly added, "If you perform, maybe choose something simple, something safe. It will help you avoid pressure." Those words hit her harder than expected. She knew the teacher didn't mean to hurt her, but it felt like a small reminder of how people often saw her as someone who needed to play it safe, someone who shouldn't take risks. She forced a smile, but inside she was disappointed. She had spent months practicing a difficult piece at home. She worked on it every day, late into the night. She loved how the music made her feel strong, confident, and brave. But now she wondered if she should hide that too. Maybe it was better to listen to the teacher. Maybe simple was safer. As she walked home that day, those words kept echoing in her mind. She didn't want to be seen as fragile or weak. She didn't want people thinking she could only do easy things. But she also didn't want to embarrass herself in front of everyone. When she reached home, she placed her school bag on the table and went straight to the piano. She sat down and touched the keys gently. The room was quiet. Only her soft breathing and the warm touch of the instrument filled the space. She closed her eyes and began to play the difficult piece she had practiced for so long. The notes flowed beautifully, each one strong and clear. She felt comfort in the music. She felt like herself again. The longer she played, the more she realized that the piano wasn't just a hobby. It was part of her God. Her mother walked in quietly and stood by the door, listening. She had heard this music many times over the past months. She knew how hard her daughter worked on it and how much it meant to her. When the girl finally finished playing, her mother smiled and said softly, "You play beautifully. Don't be afraid to show it." Those words felt different from the teacher's words. They carried warmth and trust. But still, she felt unsure. She wondered if she would be able to play like this in front of a crowd. At home, there were no judging eyes, no whispers, no pressure. That evening, she sat at the dining table, thinking about the showcase. She wanted to perform something meaningful, something that showed her true skill. But the fear of disappointing others kept pulling her back. The next day at school, she saw students practicing their performances. One student was singing loudly. Another was rehearsing a guitar solo. The room was full of energy and excitement. She stood quietly by the doorway, watching everyone. They all seemed confident, fearless, ready to shine. Her teacher walked by and smiled again. "Have you decided your piece for the performance?" The teacher asked. She hesitated and answered, "Not yet." "Still thinking?" The teacher nodded and said, "Just remember, don't push yourself too hard. An easy piece is perfectly fine." Again, the same reminder, the same subtle message. She felt a small ache in her chest, as though everyone expected her to stay within limits. It wasn't that they wanted her to fail. They simply didn't believe she could do more. Later that day, during lunch, she sat alone at a bench outside. A group of classmates nearby were talking about their performances. She listened quietly. Some of them joked about how they would impress the audience with their cool moves or unexpected twists. She wondered if anyone expected her to impress anyone at all. She stared at her hands and whispered to herself, "Maybe I can do more than they think." It was the first time she allowed herself to imagine being bold. The idea scared her, but it also warmed her. When school ended, she walked straight home again and sat at her piano. She started playing slowly, building up confidence note by note. The difficult parts that once scared her now felt familiar, almost comforting. She played the entire piece without stopping, and when she finished, she let out a long breath. She felt proud, but pride was not the same as confidence. She still worried about the showcase. What if she messed up? What if people laughed? What if the teacher felt disappointed in her for not choosing something simple? Her mother entered the room once more and sat beside her. She spoke softly. "You've worked so hard on this. Why hide something you love?" The girl stared at the piano keys. She knew her mother was right, but she still didn't know if she was ready. That night, she lay in bed thinking about everything. The teacher's warning, her own fears, her mother's encouragement, and that little voice inside her that kept asking, "What if you try?" She imagined herself on stage, with lights shining on her, playing the piece she truly loved. She imagined the audience watching silently. She imagined the final note ringing through the hall. The picture felt beautiful, but also frightening. Before she fell asleep, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I should stop hiding." The next morning, she returned to school with a slightly stronger heart. She wasn't fully confident yet, but she was beginning to believe she had a choice: to follow the easy path everyone offered, or to challenge herself and show what she could really do. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of courage. A small one, but real. She didn't know where it would lead her yet, but something inside her was changing, and that quiet change was the beginning of everything that would happen next. Part 2. The next few days moved slowly, yet something inside her felt different. Even though she still carried doubt, her heart felt a little stronger. Every morning she woke up thinking about the showcase, and every evening she sat at the piano trying to convince herself that she was capable of more than what others believed. It was the first time she had truly questioned the limits people placed on her dot at school. Life went on as usual. Students laughed in the hallway, rushed to class, shared snacks, and discussed their plans for the weekend. But she noticed something she had never paid much attention to before. Everyone around her seemed to believe in themselves, at least a little. Even the ones who weren't great singers or musicians still talked confidently about performing. Meanwhile, she was fighting a quiet battle inside her own mind. One afternoon, she stayed behind after class and walked into the empty music room. The sunlight came through the windows in soft golden stripes, making the piano shine gently. She touched the keys, letting her fingers rest there for a moment. She loved the silence of an empty room. When no one was watching, the piano felt like a friend. She played a few simple notes at first, unsure if she wanted to dive into the difficult piece again. But the moment she began, the room filled with the music she had spent months practicing. Each note reminded her of the nights she had stayed awake just to get one small part right. Each pause reminded her of the times she almost gave up, but didn't. The music wasn't just a collection of sounds to her, it was a story of her effort, her dreams, and her heart. While she played, she didn't hear the door open. A classmate stepped inside quietly, drawn by the sound. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt, didn't even move. He stood still and listened. When she finally stopped, she turned around and saw him. She nearly jumped in surprise. He smiled gently and said, "I didn't mean to scare you. I just I didn't know you could play like that." Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to anyone hearing her play, especially not someone from school. She wondered if he was being polite or honest. "You're really good," he repeated, this time with more certainty. She didn't know what to say. Compliments made her shy, especially about something she cared so deeply for. She gave a small nod and looked back at the piano. "You should play this at the showcase," he added casually. The words surprised her. She didn't expect encouragement from someone she barely talked to. She tried to smile, but ended up just quietly saying, "I don't know yet." He nodded as if he understood more than she expected. Sometimes we hold ourselves back because we think others are watching too closely. But most people just want to see someone enjoy what they do. With that, he left, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the piano. His words stayed with her for the rest of the day. She didn't feel pressured by them. Instead, they felt like a little push, a gentle reminder that she didn't need to hide out later that evening. When she returned home, she sat at the kitchen table while her mother cooked dinner. The warm smell of food filled the room. Her mother glanced over and noticed the thoughtful look on her face. "Long day?" her mother asked with a soft smile. She shrugged. "Just thinking?" "About the showcase." Her mother stirred the pot and said calmly, "Thinking is good. But don't think so much that you stop yourself from doing what feels right." She looked down at her hands, the hands that felt confident only when they touched piano keys. She wished she had that confidence in every part of her life, not just when she was alone. After dinner, she went back to the piano again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She played the difficult piece from start to finish. The music filled the house, reaching every corner. Her mother listened from the living room, smiling to herself. It was clear how deeply the music lived inside her daughter. When she finished, her mother walked in and said, "If you play like that at school, people will feel what you feel." The girl didn't answer. She wasn't sure she could play like that in front of a crowd. At home, everything felt safe. The piano felt familiar. The room felt warm. Her mother's presence felt steady. But standing on a stage in front of many people? That felt like stepping into cold water. The next day at school, the teacher called for another rehearsal. Students went up one by one to show what they would be performing. Some made mistakes and laughed it off. Some seemed nervous but determined. Others practiced with full confidence, enjoying every moment. When it was her turn, the teacher reminded her once again, "Choose something comfortable. You don't need to impress anyone. Just enjoy yourself." She nodded without answering. She sat down at the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and started with a simple tune. Something easy, something safe. It was the piece the teacher expected her to play, but halfway through, she froze. Her fingers paused. Her mind wandered. This wasn't her music. This wasn't her heart. It was a piece chosen out of fear, not passion. The room was quiet. Waiting for her to continue, she closed her eyes, took a small breath, and without planning it, she shifted into the difficult piece she had practiced for months. The first few notes made her hands tremble. The teacher looked up sharply. The students turned their heads. She almost stopped out of fear, but then something inside her refused to shrink back. She continued. The music flowed, shaky at first, but slowly gaining strength. Each note carried her fear away, little by little. She forgot about the teacher's expectations. She forgot about the students watching. She forgot about the pressure and the doubt. All she remembered was the music, the same music that kept her awake night after night, the same music that made her feel alive. When she finished, the room was strangely quiet. Not an uncomfortable silence, but one filled with surprise. Her teacher blinked a few times, trying to find the right words. That was. The teacher began softly. "I didn't know you could play like that." She lowered her gaze, unsure if this was praise or confusion. "It's a beautiful piece," the teacher continued, "but it's very challenging. Are you sure you want to play it for the showcase?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the piano keys, the same keys that had always been honest with her, even when people weren't. For the first time in her life, she heard her own voice say, "I think I want to try." The teacher studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you choose, then practice it with all your heart." She walked out of the music room that day feeling a strange mix of fear and courage. It was the boldest choice she had ever made. She didn't know what would happen at the showcase. Maybe she would succeed. Maybe she would fail. But at least she wouldn't hide. When she returned home that afternoon, her mother immediately noticed something different about her. There was a brightness in her eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. "How was school?" her mother asked. She gave a small smile and said, "I played the piece." Her mother understood without any further explanation. She wrapped her arms around her daughter and whispered, "I'm proud of you." That night, she practiced again, this time not out of fear, not out of pressure, but because she wanted to. Because it felt like the first time. She was choosing something for herself. Every note she played carried a new kind of strength, a strength she didn't know she had. And though the showcase was still days away, she felt that something inside her had already changed forever. Part 3. The days leading up to the showcase slowly passed, each one filled with a mix of excitement and fear. Every morning she would wake up thinking about the moment she would sit on the stage in front of everyone. Sometimes the thought made her smile, but other times it made her stomach twist. She wasn't used to being at the center of attention. She wasn't used to people expecting something from her, but something inside her had changed. She no longer felt like the quiet girl who always chose the safe path. Ever since she played the difficult piece in front of her class, she felt as if a new part of her had awakened, a part that had been hiding for a long time, a part that wanted to be seen. At school, people began to look at her a little differently. Some students whispered to each other when she walked by, not in a bad way, but in a curious way. They had all been surprised by her performance during rehearsal. Even students who didn't know much about music could tell she had played something challenging. A few even tried to talk to her about it, asking if she had been taking lessons for years, or if she had a secret teacher at home. She never knew how to answer those questions. All she had was practice, patience, and a strong love for the piano. There was no secret teacher, no professional training, just late nights, long afternoons, and a quiet dream. Her music teacher began giving her small tips during class, not in a controlling way, but with genuine interest. For the first time, the teacher treated her like someone capable of more than the basic level. It made her feel proud, but it also added pressure. Expectations were rising, and expectations could be heavy. One afternoon, while she practiced alone in the music room, the teacher approached her and said softly, "You have a real gift. But remember, talent grows best when the heart is calm. Don't let fear take away your joy." She nodded, even though staying calm was the hardest part. The music wasn't the problem. It was the thought of being watched by so many people. That night at home, she practiced again. Her mother sat nearby, reading a book but still listening. The notes filled the house with a calm, warm feeling. As she reached the end of the piece, her mother looked up and said, "You're ready." She wished she felt that sure. She wished she could borrow her mother's confidence for just one day. The next morning, when she reached school, she saw posters for the showcase hanging on the walls. The colors were bright, the words bold. It suddenly felt real. Not a rehearsal, not a private dream. It was happening. She walked through the hallway, feeling her heart beat faster than usual. A few students greeted her differently than before. Some smiled kindly. One girl said, "I can't wait to hear you play again." Another added, "Your rehearsal was amazing." These words meant more than they realized. No one had ever looked forward to hearing her play before. No one had expected her to shine. And now people were excited for her. The idea made her happy, but also scared. What if she disappointed them? During lunch, she sat alone under a tree outside, trying to calm her breathing. A classmate approached her, the same boy who had walked in on her playing days earlier. He sat down on the bench near her. "Nervous?" he asked gently. She nodded. There was no point pretending otherwise. "It's normal," he said. "Everyone gets nervous, even the confident ones. You should have seen me before my first performance. I couldn't even hold my guitar properly." She smiled a little. His easy way of talking helped her relax. "Do you ever get scared of making mistakes?" she asked quietly. "All the time," he replied. "But mistakes don't decide who we are. Trying does." She thought about his words for a moment. Then she asked, "What if people expect too much?" He laughed softly. "That's not your problem. You're playing because you love it, right? Not because you owe anyone anything." She looked down at her hands and nodded slowly. Before leaving, he added, "Just be yourself on stage." That's enough. His words stayed with her for the rest of the day. They were simple, but they made something inside her feel lighter. After school, she went to the music room again for one last practice. The room was empty and quiet, just the way she liked it. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began to play. This time, she wasn't practicing for the audience. She was practicing for herself. As her fingers moved across the keys, she remembered the first time she had learned this piece. She remembered failing again and again, fixing small parts one by one, playing slowly, then faster. She remembered how many times she had felt like giving up, but she never did. The music meant too much to her. When she finished playing, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. The night before the showcase, she could barely sleep. She kept picturing the stage, the lights, and all the people waiting to hear her. Every sound in the house seemed louder than usual. The ticking clock, the wind outside, the soft hum of the refrigerator. Everything made her more aware of the passing time. Her mother came into her room and sat beside her on the bed. "You're thinking too much," her mother whispered. She sighed. "I'm scared." Her mother took her hand gently. "It's okay to be scared, but fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means you care." She lay quietly for a moment, letting her mother's words sink in. "You've worked harder than anyone knows," her mother continued. "You're not doing this to prove people wrong. You're doing it to show your heart. And that's enough." She closed her eyes and felt a little calmer. The next morning arrived too quickly. She woke up with her heart beating fast again, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. She ate breakfast quietly, got dressed, and checked her bag twice before leaving the house. On the way to school, she kept telling herself, "I can do this. I can do this." When she reached the school hall, it was already buzzing with excitement. Students were arranging chairs, tuning instruments, fixing their clothes, and chatting nervously. The stage was decorated with colorful lights and a banner that said, "Annual Music Showcase." She stared at the stage for a long moment. It looked bigger than she had imagined. Her teacher walked up to her with a reassuring smile. "Are you ready?" the teacher asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she truly was. "You've practiced enough," the teacher said. "Trust yourself." She quietly thanked the teacher and went backstage. The curtains felt heavy, the lights bright, and the noise loud. She could hear the muffled sound of the audience arriving. The hall was filling up. One student went up first to sing her, then a guitar player, then a small group performing a duet. She watched each of them from the side of the stage. Some made mistakes. Some didn't. But the audience clapped for everyone. Finally, her name was called. Her heart stopped for a second. She took slow steps toward the stage. The wooden floor felt cold under her shoes. The lights felt sharp on her skin. She could hear whispers, shifting seats, and the soft rustle of paper programs. When she reached the piano bench, she sat down carefully. Her hands trembled. Her legs felt heavy. For a brief moment, she considered playing the easy piece instead. She imagined how much safer that would feel. But then she remembered the long nights of practice. She remembered how the music made her feel alive. She remembered her mother's encouragement, her classmates' kindness, her own promise to stop hiding. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. When she placed her fingers on the keys, she wasn't thinking about the audience or the teacher or the whispers. She was thinking about the music, and she began to play. The first few notes were soft and unsure. A tiny shake in her hand made the sound wobble slightly. But she didn't stop. She kept moving forward. With each passing note, her fear slowly melted away. The music carried her. She was no longer a nervous girl on a stage. She was a musician sharing a piece of her heart. And for the first time, she realized she didn't need to be fearless to be brave. Part 4. The sound of her music filled the hall, and for a moment she forgot where she was. She didn't see the bright lights or the rows of people watching her. She didn't hear the whispers, the shifting seats, or the quiet echoes in the room. All she heard was the piano, and all she felt was the music moving through her hands. In the first few seconds, she had been terrified. Her fingers had trembled, and her mind had felt tangled. But as the piece continued, she slowly let go of the fear. She focused on each note, each rise, each fall. She thought about the nights she practiced until her eyes were tired. She thought about how the music once lived only in her room, and now it was dancing through an entire hall. As she played, people in the audience leaned forward. They had expected something simple, something safe. They didn't expect to hear something so deep, so emotional, so beautifully complex. Even those who didn't know anything about music could feel the strength in the notes, the way each one carried a piece of her heart. Her teacher stood near the side of the stage, watching with a mix of surprise and pride. The teacher had underestimated her, not out of unkindness, but simply because she had always been quiet. Now, watching her perform with such emotion, the teacher realized how much she had been keeping inside. A few students whispered to each other, not in a mocking way, but in admiration. They hadn't known she could play like this. She had always blended into the background, moving quietly through her days. But here, on the stage, she seemed different, strong, focused, and fearless in her own gentle way. As the piece grew more intense, her fingers moved faster. Her breathing deepened. She felt the music push and pull inside her. Every part of her body worked together, following the rhythm she knew by heart. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was feeling. Her mother sat in the audience, hands clasped tightly, eyes glistening with pride. She had always known her daughter had something special, but seeing her perform like this made her heart swell with emotion. She wasn't just playing well, she was playing with soul. When the piece reached its quiet middle section, the hall became so still that she could almost hear the softness of her own breathing. She let the gentle notes float through the room like tiny waves of calm. Some people closed their eyes to listen. Others watched her hands move, amazed at how effortlessly she seemed to glide across the keys. But inside, she knew it wasn't effortless. It came from hours of practice, moments of doubt, and a silent fight to believe in herself. Every note was a reminder of the path she had taken to reach this moment. Halfway through the performance, she made a tiny mistake. Her fingers slipped on one of the keys. For a split second, her heart jumped, and she felt fear try to take hold again. But instead of stopping or panicking, she kept going. She let the error fade into the next notes. The audience hardly noticed. But she noticed. And that moment changed something inside her. She realized she didn't need to be perfect to be brave. The music grew strong again, reaching its emotional peak. Her hands moved quickly, confidently. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, not in a dramatic way, but naturally, as if the music were guiding her. She felt the energy of the hall, the attention, the silence, and instead of letting it scare her, she used it. By the time she reached the final part of the piece, her fear had melted completely. What remained was something new, a quiet confidence she had never felt before. The last notes were soft and gentle, almost like a whisper. She let them linger, floating in the air. Then, slowly, she lifted her hands from the keys. The hall stayed silent for a moment. A long, breathless moment. Then the applause began, soft at first, then louder still. People stood up from their chairs. The sound filled the room and wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She stared at the audience, eyes wide, unsure how to react. She had never imagined something like this. She had dreamed of playing well, of feeling proud, but she had never expected a standing ovation. Her mother stood, clapping with tears in her eyes. Her classmates clapped with excitement. Even students who barely knew her were cheering. Her teacher wiped the corner of an eye, touched by the honesty of her performance. She stood up slowly from the bench, her legs slightly shaky. She bowed politely, her heart beating fast, but in a good way. She didn't feel small, or shy, or unsure. She felt seen. When she walked backstage, she leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. She didn't know whether to smile or cry. It all felt unreal, like she was floating. The boy who had encouraged her earlier came over with a wide smile. "You did it," he said. That was honestly incredible. She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, her face warm with emotion. A group of classmates hurried backstage as well, telling her how amazing she had been. Some said they didn't know she had such talent. Others said her performance made them feel something they couldn't explain. For someone who had always felt overlooked, the attention felt strange, but also beautiful. Her teacher approached her last. "You surprised me today," the teacher said softly. "Not because you played well, but because you played with so much heart." She lowered her gaze humbly. "You chose the harder path," the teacher continued, "and it showed your strength." Hearing those words made her eyes sting slightly. For so long, she had held herself back because she thought others expected her to stay quiet and simple. But today, she had broken that idea. When she went home that evening, the world felt different. The sky looked brighter, the wind felt lighter, and even the air seemed fresh. She walked beside her mother, who kept smiling at her every few seconds. "I'm proud of you," her mother said again. "You were brave." She smiled softly. "I was scared." "You can be scared and brave at the same time," her mother replied. That night, she sat at the piano once more. She didn't practice or worry about mistakes. She simply played something gentle, letting her fingers wander freely. The music felt warm and calm. It felt like gratitude. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if this moment would change her future, or if it was simply a beautiful memory she would carry forever. But she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the girl who hid her talent. She was the girl who stepped onto a stage, trusted her heart, and let her music speak. And because of that, everything in her world felt new. The hall slowly settled after the last performance, but a quiet buzz still lingered in the air. People whispered to each other, flipping through their programs, waiting for the final part of the evening to begin. Backstage, she stood near a narrow curtain, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands felt warm and shaky at the same time. She wiped them on her clothes and tried to calm her mind. But it only made her more aware of the moment she was stepping into. She could hear the announcer reading her name. And for a brief second, her feet felt too heavy to move. She closed her eyes and told herself that she had worked too hard to step back now. All the nights she practiced, all the doubts she pushed through, all the time she reminded herself that she deserved to take this moment, they brought her here. So she took a breath and walked out. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights felt brighter than before. They stretched across the room like a warm blanket, but she still felt a shiver run down her arms. The audience wasn't making noise now. They had gone quiet the moment they saw her. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that happens when people want to see what's next. She sat down at the piano and placed her hands gently over the keys. For a moment, she didn't press anything. She just let her fingertips rest there, grounding herself. She could hear her heart in her ears, loud and quick, but she didn't let it rush her. She told herself she wouldn't think about the pressure. She wouldn't think about the teacher who told her to keep it simple. She wouldn't think about the doubts she heard over the years. This moment wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about standing up for the version of herself she had always hoped she could be. She pressed the first note. It rang through the hall softly, but the sound had a confidence in it that surprised even her. She moved to the next note, then the next, and soon her hands glided across the keys like they had done so many nights in her room. The music grew fuller, richer, rising like a wave that she had been waiting to release. People in the audience leaned forward. Some held their breath. A few even looked at each other in disbelief. They had heard her before, but never like this. There was something different in the way she played tonight. The sound carried not just skill, but emotion, quiet strength, hope, and a gentle kind of courage. As she continued, her fear slowly faded. In its place came a warm feeling, almost like freedom. She felt like she wasn't simply playing a piece anymore. She was telling a story. She was letting people see a side of her that she kept hidden for a long time. She was letting them hear the part of her that believed she could be more than what others expected. The melody shifted into a deeper section. Her hands moved faster, her body leaning slightly forward as she poured everything she had into the instrument. The music filled the hall with a sense of rising emotion, and some listeners felt their eyes sting with unexpected tears. Backstage, a few students peeked from behind the curtain, watching her in disbelief. They had seen her at rehearsals, at classes, walking the halls quietly, never drawing attention. But seeing her here, on the stage, was like seeing someone transform right in front of them. Her teacher stood at the side, hands folded tightly. There was something complicated in the teacher's expression: regret, surprise, pride, and maybe a little guilt. But most of all, there was admiration. She reached the final part of the piece. Her fingers moved softly now, each note falling like tiny drops of water onto still air. The room seemed to bend around the sound, holding it gently, letting it linger. She closed her eyes for a moment as she played the last line, letting herself feel the weight of the journey that brought her here. All the doubts, all the whispers, all the gentle discouragement, they didn't own her anymore. Not here. Not now. When the final note faded, she lifted her hands slowly, almost scared to break the moment. The room stayed silent for a heartbeat, still holding the echo of the music. Then someone in the back stood up. A few more followed, and then the whole hall rose as one. The applause broke like a wave, loud, warm, full of emotion. People clapped with the kind of energy that comes from deep appreciation. Some cheered loudly. Others simply smiled through shining eyes. The sound washed over her, filling her with a feeling she had never experienced before. She blinked, almost stunned. She had imagined applause, maybe even loud applause, but she had never once imagined a standing ovation. Her teacher was the first to reach her behind the stage once she stepped off. The teacher didn't say many words, just a quiet, sincere expression of pride and an apology wrapped into a few simple sentences. She didn't respond with anger or resentment. She simply nodded with respect. They both understood what had happened. She didn't shine because someone allowed her to. She shined because she finally gave herself permission to. Students gathered around her too, offering genuine compliments. Some told her they had never seen someone play with so much heart. Others said they felt inspired just watching her. But the words that stayed with her the most came from a younger student who looked up at her with wide eyes and said, "I want to be brave like you." Those words touched her deeply. When she stepped outside the hall later, the night air felt cool and gentle. She walked slowly, replaying everything in her mind. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small or unsure. She felt grounded, capable, and quietly powerful. She knew more challenges would come in the future. Life never stayed smooth forever. But now she understood something important. She didn't have to accept the limits placed on her. She could choose her own pace, her own path, her own voice. And that voice had finally been heard as she walked away from the hall. She carried no fear only, a calm sense of pride and the soft memory of a room full of people standing on their feet, celebrating a moment she had once been afraid to claim. She had stepped onto the stage, hoping to prove something to herself. What she didn't expect was that she would inspire everyone who watched her, and that, she felt, was the most beautiful part of all.